His car broke down on an empty highway at midnight when a motorcycle gang stopped. They didn't just mock the 74-year-old veteran, they kicked him to the ground, stomped on his hands, and spat on him while he begged for mercy. When their boots tore his shirt open, revealing a Navy SEAL trident tattoo with Team 6 underneath, the gang leader's face went white with terror. He recognized that mark, and he knew he had just made the worst mistake of his life. The stretch of Highway 47 between Cedar Falls and Millbrook was known for two things: absolutely nothing for 60 miles, and cell towers that worked about as well as a broken compass. At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in October, John Matthews learned both of these facts the hard way. His 2003 Honda Civic had been making concerning noises for the past month, but on a veteran's pension, concerning noises had to become catastrophic failures before they got attention. Tonight, they finally did. Steam hissed from under the hood like an angry snake, and the temperature gauge buried itself in the red zone as John coasted to the shoulder. He sat in the darkness for a moment, listening to the engine tick and cool. At 74, John had survived 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Iraq, and more classified operations than most people knew existed. But sitting alone on an empty highway with no cell service felt more vulnerable than any firefight he'd been in. The emergency flashers painted everything in amber silence. John reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a small flashlight, the kind they issued to recruits 40 years ago. Still worked, still reliable, unlike his car. He popped the hood and aimed the weak beam at the engine. Coolant pooled on the asphalt, and the radiator looked like it had given up on life entirely. This wasn't a roadside fix. This was a tow truck situation. And out here, that meant waiting until morning. But then he heard them. The low rumble started as a vibration in his chest, growing louder until it became the unmistakable roar of multiple motorcycles moving fast. John straightened, watching headlights cut through the darkness like searchlights. 6 bikes, maybe 7, riding hard and close together. They slowed as they approached his car, engines dropping to an aggressive idle. The lead bike, a massive Harley with chrome that caught his flashlight beam, pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead. The others formed a loose semicircle around his Honda. John closed the hood and walked back toward his driver's door, but he didn't get there. "Well, well, well," called the lead rider, a man in his 40s with arms covered in ink and a leather vest that had seen better decades. "What do we have here?" The other riders dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. They moved with the casual confidence of predators who had found something weak and alone. "Just car trouble," John said evenly. "I'll be fine." "You'll be fine?" The leader laughed, and the others joined in. "Old man, you're 60 miles from nowhere with a piece of junk that's deader than roadkill. You're about as far from fine as it gets." John kept his voice calm. "I appreciate you stopping, but I'll wait for AAA. AAA. Another biker, younger with a shaved head and a face full of piercings, stepped closer. "You think AAA's coming out here tonight? For you?" They were surrounding him now, and John felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came before trouble. His body might have been 74, but his instincts were still sharp. These men weren't good Samaritans. "Look," John said, raising his hand slightly. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to get home." "Trouble?" The leader grinned, revealing teeth that tobacco had stained yellow. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just being neighborly." He reached out and grabbed John's shoulder, squeezing hard enough to make him wince. "Matter of fact, we're so neighborly we might just help ourselves to whatever you got in that car." John tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The bikes blocked his retreat, and the bikers had formed a tight circle around him. "Please," he said quietly, "I don't have much. Take whatever you want, just let me be." The words seemed to flip a switch in the leader's head. His grin turned ugly, and his grip on John's shoulder became painful. "Did you hear that, boys? The old man's begging already." He shoved John backward, sending him stumbling toward the guardrail. "I don't like begging, old man. Makes me feel all aggressive." John caught himself against the metal barrier, his heart pounding. "I'm not looking for a fight." "Good thing," said the bald biker, "because you sure as hell wouldn't win one." What happened next came fast and brutal. The leader's fist caught John in the stomach, doubling him over and driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, a boot connected with his ribs, sending him sprawling onto the asphalt. "Stay down, Grandpa," someone snarled. But John tried to push himself up, and that's when it got worse. A heavy boot stomped down on his left hand, and John cried out as he felt bones shift in ways they weren't meant to. Another kick caught him in the side, and then another. "Please," he gasped, the word torn from his throat. "Please, stop." They didn't stop. The bald one spat on him, the saliva landing on his cheek like a mark of contempt. "Look at him begging like a dog," he laughed. The leader knelt down and grabbed a fistful of John's shirt, hauling him halfway up. "What's the matter, old man? Where's all that tough guy attitude now?" He drew his fist back for another punch, but as he yanked on John's shirt, the fabric gave way. The old cotton tore like paper, ripping wide across the chest and exposing weathered skin beneath. And that's when everything changed. There, etched into the skin over John's heart, was a tattoo that made the leader's blood turn to ice water. A Navy SEAL trident, black ink, faded but unmistakable, and underneath it, in smaller letters, Team 6. The leader's fist froze in midair. His face went from aggressive confidence to dawning horror in the space of a heartbeat. "Oh, Jesus Christ," he whispered. The other bikers noticed the change immediately. "What is it, Truck?" one of them asked. But Truck couldn't speak. He was staring at the tattoo like it was a live grenade, and in a way it was. Because Truck had seen that mark before. 15 years ago, in a burning Humvee outside Fallujah, when the world was on fire and death was reaching for him with smoking fingers, he'd seen it on the arm of the man who pulled him out of that hell, who carried him to safety, while bullets snapped through the air like angry hornets. Staff Sergeant John Matthews, Team 6. The ghost who walked through enemy fire like it was morning mist. The same man he'd just beaten and humiliated on an empty highway. Truck's hands began to shake. "Get away from him," he said quietly. "What?" The bald biker looked confused. "Truck, what the hell?" "Get away from him," Truck roared, and the other bikers jumped back like they'd been stung. John was still on the ground, breathing hard, blood running from his nose, but his eyes were clear and steady, watching Truck with the patience of someone who had seen this moment before. "You know who I am?" John said. It wasn't a question. Truck nodded slowly, unable to trust his voice. "Then you know why you should have kept driving." The highway fell silent except for the tick of cooling engines and the whisper of wind through the guardrails. The other bikers looked between Truck and John, confusion written across their faces. "Truck," the bald one said carefully, "what's going on?" Truck didn't answer immediately. He was remembering the weight of a man carrying him through smoke and fire, remembering strong hands pulling him from twisted metal while insurgent rounds sparked off the pavement, remembering a voice, calm in the chaos, saying, "I got you, son, stay with me." The same voice that had just asked him to stop. "His name is John Matthews," Truck said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Staff Sergeant John Matthews, Navy SEAL Team 6. The bald biker laughed nervously. "Come on, Truck. That old guy, he's just some. He saved my life." The words came out raw, like they'd been torn from Truck's throat. "In Iraq, my convoy hit an IED, and I was trapped in a burning vehicle. He pulled me out." He looked down at John, who was slowly pushing himself up to a sitting position against the guardrail. "I was 19 years old, crying for my mother, and this man carried me out of hell." The laughter died on the bald biker's lips. "Jesus, Truck," another one whispered. "Are you sure?" Truck knelt down beside John, careful not to make any sudden movements. Up close, he could see the scars that combat had left behind, the mark on his jaw where shrapnel had kissed him, the way his left shoulder sat slightly higher than his right from an old bullet wound. "Sergeant Matthews," he said quietly. "It's Tommy Kowalski, 3rd Infantry Division, 2007. John studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I remember. You were scared you'd never see your girl again." "Maria," Truck whispered. You told me to think about Maria. Did you marry her? Truck's eyes filled with tears. 2 kids, boy and a girl, named the boy John. For a moment, the only sound was the wind and the distant hum of the highway. Then John smiled, just slightly. Good, he said. That's good, Tommy. Truck turned to face his gang, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority that none of them had ever heard before. We're going to fix his car, he said. The bald biker stared at him. What? You heard me. We're going to fix his car, and then we're going to escort him wherever he needs to go. Truck? What the hell has gotten into you? Truck stood up slowly, his massive frame unfolding like a mountain. When he looked at the bald biker, there was something in his eyes that made the younger man take a step back. That man, Truck said, pointing at John, has more courage in his little finger than all of us combined. He's earned the right to travel these roads without fear, without harassment, without some punk-ass bikers thinking they can take what they want from him. He looked around at the rest of his gang. Any of you got a problem with that? Nobody spoke. Good. Truck reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. I know a guy with a tow truck, 24-hour service. But John raised his hand. That's not necessary, son. Yes, it is. Truck's voice was firm. It's the least I can do. He made the call, speaking quietly into the phone. While he waited for the tow truck, the other bikers stood around awkwardly, uncertain how to process what they'd just witnessed. The bald one approached Truck cautiously. Hey man, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know, because you didn't ask. Truck cut him off. You saw an old man and assumed he was weak. That's on you. He looked at the others. That's on all of us. John was still sitting against the guardrail, testing his injured hand. It hurt, but nothing was broken. He'd had worse. Truck knelt beside him again. Sergeant, I need you to know how sorry I am. What we did to you, there's no excuse. We all make mistakes, Tommy, John said quietly. The measure of a man isn't whether he makes them, it's what he does after. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared in the distance. The tow truck driver, a heavy-set man named Dale, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else at midnight, hooked up John's Honda with professional efficiency. Where are we headed? He asked. John gave him an address in Cedar Falls, about 15 miles back the way they'd come. Dale nodded and climbed back into his truck. But before they could leave, Truck walked up to John's window. Sergeant, he said, I want you to have something. He pulled off a chain from around his neck. Hanging from it was a small metal medallion, a Purple Heart that he'd earned in that same IED attack 15 years ago. This belongs to you, he said, holding it out. You saved the life it represents. John looked at the medal, then at Tommy's face. That's yours, son. You earned it. I earned it because you made sure I lived long enough to earn it. John accepted the chain, weighing it in his palm. Thank you. The convoy of bikes followed the tow truck all the way to Cedar Falls, riding escort like an honor guard. They didn't speak, didn't rev their engines, just maintained a respectful distance and made sure John got home safe. When they reached his small house on Elm Street, the bikers helped unload his few belongings from the Honda. Truck walked John to his front door, carrying his overnight bag. Sergeant, he said as John fumbled for his keys, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. He handed over a business card. I run a motorcycle repair shop now, but that's not what this is about. This is about debt, and honor, and making sure that what happened tonight never happens again. John looked at the card, then at Tommy's face. You turned out all right, son. Because of you. They shook hands, and Truck felt the strength still there in the old man's grip. Then he walked back to his bike, gathered his crew, and they disappeared into the night. John stood on his porch for a long time after they left, holding the Purple Heart and thinking about the strange roads that life sometimes took. He'd been beaten and humiliated on a dark highway, but he'd also been reminded that honor could emerge from the most unlikely places. The next morning, John called his insurance company about the car. While he was on hold, his doorbell rang. When he opened it, he found a delivery truck in his driveway and a man holding a clipboard. Mr. Matthews, I've got a delivery for you. I didn't order anything. The delivery man consulted his paperwork. Says here, it's from Kowalski's Custom Cycles, a 2018 Honda Accord, fully loaded. Insurance and registration are already taken care of. John stared at the gleaming sedan in his driveway. There's been a mistake. No mistake, sir. There's also this. He handed John an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Sergeant Matthews, a man who saved my life shouldn't have to worry about car trouble. This is a small payment on a debt I'll never be able to fully repay. The title is in your name, Tommy Kowalski, SFC Redera, and the Iron Brotherhood MC. At the bottom of the note was a phone number and a single line, call if you need anything, day or night. John folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet, next to his old military ID and a faded photo of his unit from 1971. Sometimes the world surprised you, sometimes the worst moments led to the best ones. He climbed into his new car, started the engine, and drove to the VA hospital for his weekly checkup. The Honda ran like a dream. At the hospital, word of what had happened had somehow gotten around. The young Marines in the waiting room stood when he walked in. The nurses smiled and asked if he needed anything. The doctor who examined his bruised ribs shook his head and muttered something about damn heroes not knowing when to stay out of trouble. But what struck John most was a conversation he overheard between two young soldiers in the parking lot. Did you hear about the old SEAL who got jumped by bikers? Yeah, man. Crazy story. But the best part is what happened after. What do you mean? The biker who beat him up? Turns out the old guy saved his life in Iraq years ago. Now the whole MC is like his personal protection detail. No shit? No shit. My cousin knows one of those bikers. Says they've been spreading the word to every club within 100 miles. Hands off the old warrior. He's under their protection now. John smiled as he got into his car. Sometimes honor found its way home, even when you'd given up looking for it. 6 months later, John was driving to his grandson's graduation when he noticed a motorcycle in his rearview mirror. Then another. By the time he reached the interstate, he had an escort of 8 bikes riding in formation around him. He didn't recognize most of the riders, but he recognized the respect. Word had spread through the veteran community, through the motorcycle clubs, through the network of men and women who understood what service meant. The old SEAL who'd been beaten on a dark highway had become something of a legend. Not because of what had happened to him, but because of how he'd handled it. With dignity, with grace, with the kind of quiet strength that reminded everyone what honor looked like. At his grandson's graduation, the young Marines in the honor guard all knew who he was. They stood a little straighter when he walked by. They understood that they were in the presence of something rare, a man who had given everything for his country and asked for nothing in return. After the ceremony, as John was walking back to his car, a young woman in dress blues approached him. "Excuse me, sir, are you Staff Sergeant Matthews?" John nodded. "My father served with you in Vietnam. He always said you were the best soldier he ever knew." "What's your father's name?" "Was, sir. Lieutenant David Chen. He was killed in Hue City." John's face went still. David was a good man, and a good officer. "He used to tell me about a SEAL who saved his platoon during a river crossing, said the man disappeared into the jungle afterward and never took credit." John didn't confirm or deny it. Some stories were too sacred for words. "Sir," the young woman continued, "I just wanted to say thank you. For my father, for all of them." She saluted, sharp and precise. John returned it, and for a moment, the past and present stood together in perfect understanding. As John drove home that night, escorted by his unlikely guardian angels on their motorcycles, he thought about the strange mathematics of honor, how a moment of violence could become a moment of redemption, how enemies could become protectors, how the worst night of his old age had somehow become one of the best. The Highway 47 incident, as it came to be known, became the stuff of legend in veteran circles. The story grew with each telling, but the heart of it remained true. Sometimes honor has to be beaten down before it can stand back up. And sometimes the people who knock you down are the same ones who help you back to your feet. John never asked for protection, never demanded respect, never told anyone what to do. But he got all three anyway, because sometimes the world recognizes real strength and decides to protect it. The old SEAL drove into the night, surrounded by the rumble of engines and the knowledge that honor once awakened is a hard thing to put back to sleep. Behind him, the Iron Brotherhood rode in formation, their engines singing a song of redemption on the empty highway. And somewhere in the darkness, other veterans were hearing that song and remembering what it meant to stand together. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, but John wasn't afraid anymore. He had learned something important that night. You're never too old to be surprised by honor, and you're never too broken to be made whole again. But what happened next changed everything. 3 weeks after the graduation, John received a call that would reshape his understanding of brotherhood. The voice on the other end was young, nervous, and unfamiliar. "Sir, is this Staff Sergeant John Matthews?" "It is." "Sir, my name is Marcus Rivera. I'm a Marine, currently stationed at Camp Pendleton. I need your help." John set down his coffee. Something in the young man's voice reminded him of Tommy Kowalski, 15 years ago. Scared, desperate, trying to be brave. "What kind of help, son?" "It's my unit, sir. We're deploying to Afghanistan next month. And our squad leader, he's not ready. He's going to get people killed." John had heard this story before. Young officers with too much pride and too little experience, sending good men into bad situations. "That's a serious accusation, Marine." "Yes, sir. But there's more." Word got around about what happened with you and the Iron Brotherhood, about how you handled that situation with honor. "Sir, we need someone to teach us what honor looks like in the field." John was quiet for a long moment. "Marine, I'm 74 years old. My fighting days are behind me." "That's not what we're asking for, sir. We're asking for your wisdom." And that's how John found himself, 2 weeks later, standing in front of 30 young Marines at Camp Pendleton, sharing lessons that couldn't be found in any manual. He didn't talk about his kill count or his classified missions. Instead, he talked about the weight of decisions, the burden of leadership, and the difference between being tough and being strong. Courage, he told them, isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're scared, even when it costs you something, even when nobody's watching. One young Marine raised his hand. "Sir, what if doing the right thing means going against orders?" John studied the kid's face. Barely 20, probably from some small town where joining the Marines was the only way out. "Son, there's a difference between following orders and following conscience. A good leader knows when those two things conflict, and a great leader knows what to do about it." After the session, Marcus Rivera approached him privately. "Sir, I wanted you to know something. That squad leader I was worried about? He was in the audience today, and after hearing what you said, he pulled me aside and asked me to help him become better." John nodded. "That's what real strength looks like, Marine. It takes more courage to admit you're wrong than to double down on being right." As John drove away from Camp Pendleton that evening, he reflected on the strange journey his life had taken. A beating on a dark highway had led to redemption for a motorcycle gang, which had led to respect from the veteran community, which had led to young Marines asking him to share hard-earned wisdom. Honor, he realized, wasn't a destination. It was a ripple effect. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months later, John received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of 30 Marines in combat gear, standing in formation somewhere in Afghanistan. On the back, in careful handwriting, someone had written, "Sir, we brought your lessons with us. Every man came home, semper fi. Miners Marcus Rivera and the Wolf Pack." That photograph now sits on John's mantelpiece, next to his Purple Heart and the business card from Tommy Kowalski. 3 reminders that sometimes the worst moments in life create the best ones, and that honor has a way of multiplying when you're not trying to hoard it. The Iron Brotherhood still escorts him to important events. Young veterans still seek his counsel. And somewhere in Afghanistan, a squad of Marines carries themselves a little straighter because an old SEAL taught them that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Tommy Kowalski calls every month, just to check in. His motorcycle shop has become an unofficial gathering place for veterans, and he started a program providing free repairs for any veteran who needs them. He tells people it's his way of paying forward what John Matthews taught him. That honor isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you choose again, every single day. And late at night, when John can't sleep, he sometimes drives out to Highway 47, just to remember. The road looks different now, not empty and threatening, but full of possibility, because he learned something important in that dark moment when boots were stomping on his hands and spit was running down his face. You don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have left. The highway stretches ahead, dark and endless, but John isn't afraid anymore. He has learned something important. You're never too old to be surprised by honor, and you're never too broken to be made whole again. Some stories end with justice. Some end with revenge. But the best ones end with something better: understanding. And on Highway 47, in the amber glow of emergency flashers and the rumble of motorcycle engines, understanding had found its way home at last. But more than that, it had learned to multiply. And in a world that often forgets what honor looks like, that might be the most important lesson of all.